Darius Coleman drove into the parking lot of his apartment building at 11:43 at night. His body hurt so much that he felt like he was much older than 34. His daughter, Nia, was sleeping at her aunt's house tonight, which meant the apartment would be dark and quiet when he got home. He walked up the stairs slowly with his keys already in his hand. Then he stopped suddenly when he heard water running inside. Someone was in his kitchen. He pushed the door open, turned on the light, and saw Victoria Hale, the CEO of Whitmore Industries, standing at his sink with her sleeves rolled up, washing his dishes. She turned to look at him, and her eyes didn't look like a boss's eyes. She looked like she felt really bad about something. The bright lights at Whitmore Industries Distribution Center flickered the same way they had for the past 2 years, making that familiar, sickly glow over the concrete floors. Darius came to work every morning at 5:30 and hardly ever left before 8 at night. 14 hours was a short day. 16 was normal. He worked in operations, which was supposed to be a coordinator position, but the job title meant nothing when he was the only one actually doing the coordinating. His boss, Richard Bolton, had a corner office with a window and would usually disappear around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The other coordinators, all of them white, were able to keep their workloads reasonable. They had lunches. They had coffee breaks. They had time to stand around and talk about their weekends. Darius had spreadsheets, shipping lists, and a constant feeling that if he stopped moving for even a moment, everything would fall apart. The jokes came wrapped in smiles and shoulder pats. Coleman's got it handled. He's built different. You know, Darius, the man's a machine. Must be nice to have that kind of strength. Wish I had your energy. The words sounded almost like compliments if you didn't listen too carefully. But Darius heard what was really underneath them. The idea that he could take more, that he should take more, that his ability to suffer was somehow in his genes, inherited, expected. He never complained. Complaining needed energy he didn't have and trust in a system that had never given him a reason to believe. When his wife Janelle died 3 years ago, he had taken exactly 4 days off before going back to work because the bills didn't stop, and neither did his daughter's need for food, clothes, and a home. The company sent flowers. Richard Bolton signed the card without looking up from his computer. Nia was 7 now, smart and curious, and completely unaware of how close they lived to the edge. She knew her father worked a lot. She knew they couldn't buy the things her classmates had. She knew that sometimes Daddy fell asleep at the kitchen table with his head on his arms, still wearing his work boots. But she didn't know about the second and third notices from the electric company, or the way Darius sometimes skipped meals so she could have seconds. The apartment was small, a 2-bedroom in a building that had seen better decades. The hallway always smelled like other people's cooking, and the walls were thin enough to hear arguments and televisions and crying babies at all hours. But it was theirs. He had painted Nia's room himself, a soft purple color she had picked out from a hardware store sample. He had built her bookshelf from scrap wood. He had made it a home through pure determination. Tonight, standing in his kitchen doorway, staring at Victoria Hale, none of that mattered. The woman who ran a $3 billion company was standing in his tiny kitchen, her expensive blouse wet at the cuffs, her hands in his dish soap. The distance between their worlds felt impossible to cross, even though she was standing 3 feet away from him. What are you doing here? His voice came out harder than he planned, or maybe exactly as hard as he planned. He didn't know anymore. Victoria turned off the water and dried her hands on a dish towel that had been hanging on the oven door. She didn't smile, didn't say nice things. I needed to talk to you, and I didn't want it to happen in an office where you'd feel like you couldn't say what you really think. So you broke into my apartment. Your neighbor let me in. Mrs. Patterson, I told her I was a friend from work, and that I had something important for you. She seemed happy you had a visitor. Darius felt a quick flash of annoyance at Mrs. Patterson for trusting her so easily, but it went away quickly. The old woman was lonely and kind, and she had probably been excited at the thought of him having company. You couldn't have called? Would you have answered? The question hung in the air between them. They both knew the answer. A call from the CEO's office would have meant trouble. Darius would have spent the hours before any meeting convincing himself he was about to get fired, thinking through every possible mistake, wondering which his 14-hour days had somehow not been enough. He crossed his arms over his chest. What do you want? Victoria reached into a leather bag sitting on his kitchen table and pulled out a manila folder. The paper looked ordinary, but the weight of it seemed to press down on the entire room. 3 weeks ago, I started getting anonymous emails. She said, "Money problems in the distribution division." I thought it was an angry employee making noise. So I gave it to internal audit. What they found made me sick. She opened the folder and spread several documents across his table, pushing aside his daughter's homework and a half-empty box of cereal. Darius didn't move to look at them. Richard Bolton has been running a fake payroll plan for the past 18 months. 3 employees who don't exist, salaries put into accounts he controls. But that's not the worst part. Victoria's voice got tighter. He's been purposely giving all their work to you. Every task, every project, every emergency that should have been handled by a team of 4 has been landing on your desk alone. Darius felt something cold settle in his chest. I know I work more than the others. That's not news. It's not just a workload. Victoria pulled out another document. Your performance reviews have been changed every quarter for the past 2 years. Bolton has turned in evaluations that keep you exactly 1 point below the level needed for promotion consideration. Your actual numbers, your efficiency ratings, your error rates, they're exceptional, among the best in the company. But on paper, you're always almost good enough. The words landed like physical hits. Darius stared at the documents, at the neat columns of numbers that represent his life being stolen from him, one spreadsheet at a time. 2 years. 2 years of believing he wasn't quite measuring up, of pushing harder and sleeping less, of missing Nia's school plays and birthday parties because he thought if he just worked a little more, tried a little harder, he might finally get ahead. Why me? The question came out as barely more than a whisper. Why not someone else? Victoria met his eyes, and for the first time, he saw something crack in her calm. Because you don't have anyone in your corner, no family connections to the company, no golf buddies in management, no fraternity brothers in HR. And because she paused, and the pause said everything, because Bolton knew that a black man in a department full of white supervisors would have a harder time being believed if he ever complained. Darius sat down heavily in one of his kitchen chairs. The plastic creaked under his weight. He thought about every time he had wondered if he was imagining things. Every sideways glance. Every meeting he wasn't invited to. Every opportunity that went to someone less qualified. He told himself he was being paranoid. He told himself to work harder, to be better, to prove them wrong. They had never planned to let him prove anything. 2 years, he said, and his voice broke on the words. I missed 2 years of my daughter's life for this. Victoria stood motionless across the kitchen, watching him process the destruction of everything he had believed about his own situation. She didn't offer comfort. She didn't move to touch him. She seemed to understand that nothing she could do in this moment would be welcome. Darius pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes, refusing to let himself fall apart completely. When he finally looked up, his face had hardened into something between rage and exhaustion. Why are you here? Really? You could have sent this through lawyers. You could have called me into a conference room with HR and a settlement agreement. Why are you standing in my kitchen at midnight? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice had lost its business smoothness because I built that company for my father's legacy. And I told myself I was building something fair, something that rewarded hard work, no matter where someone came from or what they looked like. I believed that because believing it was comfortable, she sat down across from him, the kitchen table between them, like a negotiating desk. 3 weeks ago, I looked at a spreadsheet and saw a name I didn't recognize. Just a name and a salary, one of thousands. And when I started pulling threads, your file came up and I saw everything. You saw numbers, Darius said flatly, data points. I saw a single father working hours that should be illegal. I saw a salary that hadn't increased in 2 years, even though the department's productivity went up 30%. I saw a man being purposely erased while I signed off on quarterly reports that told me everything was fine. Victoria's hands were shaking slightly, and she pressed them flat against the table. I could have sent lawyers. I could have made this clean and professional and protected the company from lawsuits, but I didn't want to be protected. I wanted to stand in the place where the damage actually lives and see what my blindness cost. So what this is penance? You came to wash my dishes so you could feel better about yourself? I came because I didn't know what else to do. Because I sat in my car outside your building for an hour trying to figure out the right way to do this, and there is no right way. There's no policy for how to tell someone their life has been stolen. So I came inside and your dishes were in the sink, and I just started washing them because I needed to do something useful while I waited for you. Something real and small and ordinary. Darius studied her face looking for the act, the business mask. He didn't find it. What he found instead was a woman who seemed truly broken by what she had discovered. And he didn't know what to do with that. What happens now, he asked. Now I try to fix what I can. It won't be enough. It can never be enough. But I have to try. A key turned in the front door, and both of them froze. The door swung open to show Darius' sister, Monica, carrying a sleeping Nia on her shoulder. Monica stopped dead when she saw Victoria at the kitchen table. She threw up at my place, Monica said, her eyes moving between Darius and the stranger. Thought she should be home in her own bed. Who's this? Darius stood quickly, moving to take Nia from his sister's arms. The little girl moved, her eyes opening. Daddy, I'm here. Baby, you're home. Nia's eyes drifted past her father to the woman sitting at their table. Who's that lady? Victoria got up from her chair slowly, very aware that she was intruding on something private. I'm a friend of your father's from work. I was just leaving, but Nia was awake now. That particular wide-awake state of a sick child who doesn't want to go back to sleep. She wiggled until Darius sat her down, then walked over to Victoria with the fearless curiosity of a 7-year-old. You're pretty. Is that your real hair? Victoria touched her hair self-consciously. It is. I like it. Daddy, can I have water? Monica moved toward the kitchen, still looking suspiciously at Victoria. Darius watched his daughter, who had pulled out a chair and climbed up to sit across from the CEO, like they were about to have a business meeting. Why are you at our house so late? Nia asked. Victoria looked at Darius, uncertain. He gave a slight nod. I came to talk to your dad about work. Daddy works too much. Nia said it with the simple belief of absolute truth. He's always tired. He falls asleep before the end of movies. Sometimes he forgets to eat dinner because he's still doing work things on his computer. Nia, Darius said softly. It's true, Daddy. You do. She turned back to Victoria. Victoria knelt down, so she was at Nia's eye level. Something changed in her face. The last wall coming down. Your daddy is one of the hardest workers at our company. He should have been working less this whole time. I'm trying to fix that. Good. Nia nodded seriously. Because I miss him. The words hit the room like a bomb. Monica stopped moving. Darius felt his throat close. Victoria stayed kneeling, her eyes bright, looking at this child who had just said what all the spreadsheets and memos could never capture. The human cost of what had been done. I know you do, Victoria said quietly. And I'm so sorry. Nia tilted her head. Why are you sorry? Daddy says sorry is for when you did something wrong. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes, she finally said, people do wrong things without meaning to because they're not paying attention, and then they have to work really hard to make it right. Nia seemed to think about this. Then she yawned widely. Okay, I'm tired again. Nice to meet you, pretty lady. Darius picked his daughter up before she could say anything else. He carried her toward her bedroom, while Monica stayed behind with Victoria, the silence between them heavy and uncomfortable. When he returned, he found his sister with her arms crossed and Victoria putting on her jacket. I'll let you get Nia settled, Victoria said. She pulled a business card from her pocket and set it on the table. My personal cell is on the back. Call me when you're ready to talk about next steps. There's no deadline. Take whatever time you need. She moved toward the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, I'm going to do everything in my power to make this right. Not because it's good for company or because I'm afraid of lawsuits, because it's what should have happened 2 years ago, and I failed you. I failed a lot of people. I won't fail again. She left without waiting for a response. The door clicked shut behind her. Monica turned to Darius with 100 questions in her eyes, but he just shook his head. Later. I'll explain everything later. Right now, I need to sit with my daughter until she falls asleep. He walked into Nia's room and laid down beside her on the small bed, staring at the purple walls he had painted with such hope. His daughter curled against him, already drifting off again. "Daddy," she whispered. "Yeah, baby. I don't think the pretty lady is bad. She seems sad. She is sad. Good. Sad means she cares." Darius didn't answer. He just held his daughter and listened to her breathing slow and wondered if caring was enough to fix anything. The next week felt strange. Victoria had kept her word about giving Darius time. No calls from the company, no emails, no pressure. But the card with her personal number sat on his kitchen counter, like a small bomb, waiting to be used. He went to work as usual, clocked in at 5:30, started on a mountain of tasks that had somehow become his entire job. But now he saw everything differently. The way Richard Bolton avoided eye contact, the way his white co-workers seemed to have endless time for coffee breaks and personal calls while his inbox overflowed, the way no one questioned why one man did the work of four. On Thursday evening, he finally called the number. Victoria answered on the second ring. "Darius, I want to understand what you're offering." "Exactly." They met the next morning in a conference room at a hotel downtown, neutral territory. Victoria came alone. No lawyers, no archive representatives. She laid out the offer in clear terms. Senior Operations Manager. Direct report to the VP of Distribution. Salary that reflects what you should have been earning for the past 2 years, plus back pay for the difference. Normal hours, meaning you'd actually get to leave at 5 like everyone else, and a seat at the table when decisions are made. Darius listened to the numbers, the benefits, the promises. It was more than fair. It was generous. It was everything he had been working toward for years, handed to him on a silver platter. Why does this feel like guilt money? Victoria didn't flinch. Because that's part of what it is. I won't pretend otherwise. And if I take it, what happens? I become the black guy who got promoted because the CEO felt bad. Every white manager in that building will think I didn't earn it. Some of them will think that no matter what the situation is, that's the reality of the system we're working in. Victoria leaned forward. But here's what I know. You've been doing better than everyone in your department for 2 years while carrying 4 times the workload. Your numbers prove it. Your results prove it. The only thing that's been stopping your advancement is deliberate sabotage by someone who should have been protecting your career. This isn't charity. This is correction. Darius was quiet for a long moment. "Can I ask you something personal? If I were white, would any of this have happened to me?" Victoria didn't answer right away. The silence stretched between them, uncomfortable and necessary. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I've been asking myself that question every day since I found your file. And I think we both know the answer. Bolton chose you because you were vulnerable. Because the system made you vulnerable. Because men who look like him have been exploiting men who look like you for generations. And they've gotten away with it. Because people like me don't look closely enough." She met his eyes directly. "I can't undo what happened to you. I can't give you back the time you missed with your daughter or erase the exhaustion and the doubt and the pain. But I can make sure it never happens to anyone else at my company. And I can give you the position you've earned. If you'll take it, I need to think about it. Take all the time you need." He thought about it for 3 days. Talked to Monica, who was suspicious but practical. Talked to his pastor, who advised forgiveness without being naive. Talked to Nia, who just wanted to know if Daddy would be home for dinner more often. On Monday morning, he called Victoria and accepted the position. The news of Richard Bolton's firing spread through the distribution center like wildfire. Internal investigation. Financial misconduct. The official statement was carefully worded, but everyone knew something bigger was happening. HR called required meetings. Anonymous hotlines were set up. Whispers filled every corner. Darius walked into his new office, a real office with a door and a window, and tried to feel like he belonged there. His first day was a challenge of stares and silence. The other managers, most of them white, didn't know how to interact with him. Some were polite to the point of awkwardness. Others made no effort to hide their anger. He heard the whispers. Diversity hire. affirmative action. Political correctness run amok. He kept his head down and focused on the work. The first person to actually talk to him like a normal human being was James Washington, one of the warehouse supervisors, a black man in his 50s who had been with the company for decades. James stopped by Darius's office on the third day and closed the door behind him. "You doing okay?" Darius shrugged. "Surviving? That's about all any of us have ever done here." James sat down without being invited, the familiarity of a shared experience making formality unnecessary. "I've been watching this company for 23 years. You're the first black man in a management position since Marcus Thompson got pushed out in 2008. What happened to him? Same thing that almost happened to you. Just slower death by 1,000 cuts. They didn't need to create fake employees back then. They just made his life so miserable he quit. Called it a voluntary resignation." James smiled without humor. "Different decade, same playbook. So why do you stay?" "Because somebody has to be here to watch. And because I got 3 kids who needed dental insurance." He leaned forward. "Listen, I'm glad you got this position. You deserve it. But don't think for a second that Victoria Hale's guilt is going to protect you. The system doesn't change because the CEO has a moment of conscience. It changes when we make a change. One day at a time, one fight at a time." Darius nodded slowly. "I'm not looking for protection. I'm looking to do my job well enough that nobody can question whether I belong here. Then you're going to have to be twice as good for half the recognition." "Same as always." James stood up. "But at least now you'll be in the room where it happens. That's something." Victoria, true to her word, kept her distance professionally. She didn't step in when Darius faced resistance from other managers. She didn't make special appearances to publicly support him. She let him sink or swim on his own merits, which was exactly what he had wanted. Even as part of him resented the isolation. But outside of work, something unexpected began to happen. It started with a text message 3 weeks into his new position. Victoria asking if Nia was feeling better, remembering the sick child from that night in his kitchen. Darius responded with a brief update. Victoria sent back a smiley face which seemed so out of place with everything he knew about her that he actually laughed. More texts followed. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing that crossed professional lines. Just small moments of human connection. Victoria asking about his day. Darius sharing a funny thing Nia had said. Conversations that had nothing to do with work or guilt or the weight of what had happened between them. One evening about 2 months in, Victoria texted asking if he had had dinner before Darius could think better of it. He invited her to join him and Nia for spaghetti. It was Nia's favorite, the one meal he could make without burning anything. Victoria arrived with a bottle of wine and a coloring book for Nia, who received both the guest and the gift with enthusiastic approval. The evening was strange and ordinary at the same time. A CEO eating supermarket pasta at a folding table in a cramped apartment, while a 7-year-old explained in great detail why purple was objectively the best color. She's wonderful, Victoria said later when Nia had gone to bed, and they sat on the small balcony with their wine glasses watching the parking lot below. You've done an amazing job with her. She's the best thing about my life. Everything I do is for her. I know. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I never had children, never found the time, never found the right person. And then suddenly I was 42 and running a company. And it seemed like that window had closed. I used to tell myself I was okay with it, that my legacy would be the business, the jobs I created, the impact I had. And now I'm not sure what any of it means. She turned to look at him, and in the dim light from the kitchen window, she seemed younger, somehow less armored. I've spent my whole career trying to prove that a woman could run a company as well as any man. I fought for every inch of respect, every promotion, every seat at the table. And in the process, I became blind to everyone fighting battles I'd never have to face. We all have blind spots. Mine cost you 2 years of your life. Darius took a long sip of wine. You know what I think about most? It's not the missed time with Nia, though that hurts. It's the way I felt about myself. For 2 years, I believed I wasn't good enough. I believed that no matter how hard I worked, there was something fundamentally lacking in me. Do you know what that does to a person? To wake up every day convinced that your best will never be enough. Victoria didn't respond with words. She just listened, the way she had been learning to listen. And the worst part, Darius continued, is that I can't be sure how much of that doubt was planted by Bolton's sabotage and how much was already there. Growing up black in America, you learn early that the deck is stacked. You learn to expect less. And then when less is exactly what you get, you can't tell if it's a system or yourself. I wish I could undo it. All of it. You can't. But you're trying to do something now, and that matters. They sat in silence for a while, the night sounds of a city filling the space between them. When Victoria finally left, she hugged him at the door, a brief and careful embrace that somehow felt more important than any of the professional interactions they had had. Over the next months, these evenings became a pattern. Not dates exactly, but something that was building toward meaning. Victoria attended Nia's school play and cheered louder than any parent. She helped Darius study for the management certification exam that had been impossibly out of reach before. She learned to cook spaghetti the way Nia liked it with extra Parmesan and earned the official title of Daddy's friend who's good at coloring. The complications were obvious, even when neither of them spoke about them directly. Victoria was his CEO, his benefactor, the woman whose guilt had opened doors for him. The power imbalance was impossible to ignore, and beyond that, there was the world outside. A wealthy white woman and a black single father would draw attention, judgment, assumptions. It was Nia inevitably who forced the conversation. "Daddy, is Victoria your girlfriend?" They were eating dinner, just the two of them. And the question came out of nowhere with the particular timing children have for maximum emotional impact. "Why do you ask, baby?" "Because she comes over a lot. And you smile more when she's here. And I heard Auntie Monica say that you were playing with fire." Nia frowned. "What does that mean? Are you going to get burned?" Darius set down his fork. "Victoria and I are friends. Good friends. We care about each other. But you like her like her. I can tell out of the mouths of babes." Darius sighed. "It's complicated. Nia, because she's my boss. Because she's white and I'm black and people will talk. Because I don't know if what I feel is real or just gratitude for someone who finally saw me. Because I'm terrified of letting anyone close again after losing your mother." He said none of this. Instead, he said, "Sometimes grown-up feelings take time to figure out." "Well, I think you should figure out. I like Victoria. She's nice and she helps with my homework, and she doesn't treat us like we're different." Nia returned to her spaghetti. The matter apparently settled in her 7-year-old mind. That night, after Nia was asleep, Darius called Victoria. "We need to talk in person." She came over the next evening after Nia was in bed. They sat on the couch, more space between them than usual, the air heavy with anticipation. Nia asked if you were my girlfriend. Victoria's face flickered with something he couldn't quite read. "What did you tell her?" "That we were friends. That feelings are complicated." "Are they complicated?" Darius turned to face her fully. "You're my CEO, Victoria, the woman who discovered I was being exploited and swooped in to fix everything. How am I supposed to know if what I feel for you is real or just some messed up gratitude response? Is that what you think this is? Gratitude? I don't know what this is. That's the problem." He ran a hand over his face. "And even if it's real, even if this is something genuine growing between us, there's a whole world out there ready to tear it apart. People at work will say, 'You promoted me because we're sleeping together.' People outside will look at us and see stereotypes instead of people. I've spent my whole life fighting to be seen as more than assumptions, and this would give everyone exactly the story they want to tell." Victoria reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were cool against his palm. "I've been thinking about the same things. Every logical argument against this. I've made it to myself 100 times. The power dynamics, the optics, the way my board would react." She paused. "But then I think about how I feel when I'm with you and Nia. I think about how this apartment feels more like home than my penthouse ever has. And I wonder if maybe logic isn't the point. What is the point then? I don't know. Maybe just being honest about what we want." She squeezed his hand. "I want you, Darius, not as a project or a penance or a way to make my guilt feel better. I want you because you're kind and strong, and you make me laugh, and you challenge me to be better. I want to be part of your life and Nia's life, in whatever way you'll let me. And the complications, we face them together or we don't do this at all. I won't sneak around, and I won't pretend in public that you're just an employee. If we do this, we do it in the open. Consequences be damned. Darius was quiet for a long time. The clock on the wall ticked through the silence. Finally, he spoke. Nia asked me tonight if I was going to get burned. She heard Monica saying I was playing with fire. A small smile crossed his face. I told her, feelings are complicated, but here's what I didn't tell her. After Janelle died, I never thought I'd feel anything again. I didn't want to. Loving someone and losing them nearly destroyed me. So I closed that part of myself off, poured everything into work and Nia, and convinced myself that was enough. He turned to look at Victoria. Really? Look at her, letting down the walls he had built so carefully. Meeting you, getting to know you, it's broken something open. I don't know if this will work. I don't know if we can survive everything that's stacked against us. But I know that I feel more alive around you than I have in years. And I'm tired of being afraid. Victoria leaned closer. So what do we do? I think Darius said slowly. We start with dinner. A real dinner at a real restaurant where people can see us together, and we figure out the rest as we go. That sounds terrifying. Yeah, it does. But when she kissed him softly and carefully and full of promise, the fear didn't seem to matter quite as much. A year later, the changes at Whitmore Industries were impossible to ignore. The diversity programs Victoria had put in place weren't just policy documents gathering dust in HR folders. There were real numbers, real accountability, real consequences for managers who fell back into old patterns. The anonymous hotline had generated dozens of reports, each one investigated thoroughly. 3 more firings had followed Bolton's, along with a complete restructuring of the promotion evaluation process. Darius had done great in his new role in ways that surprised even him. The skills he had developed while surviving 2 years of impossible workload translated into remarkable efficiency as a manager. He mentored young employees, especially those of color, with an intentionality that came from understanding exactly what obstacles they faced. His team had the lowest turnover rate in the company and consistently exceeded performance targets. He and Victoria had gone public with their relationship 6 months ago after endless discussions about timing and optics and risk. The reaction had been exactly as mixed as they had expected. Some colleagues were supportive, others skeptical, and a few openly hostile. The board had expressed concerns that Victoria had addressed head-on, offering to remove herself from any decisions affecting Darius's position and putting in place oversight rules to ensure fairness. The whispers never stopped entirely. They probably never would. But Darius had learned to tell the difference between the criticism that mattered and the noise that was simply the sound of a changing world meeting resistance. Tonight, Victoria's car was parked outside his apartment complex again, just as it had been that first night. But this time, there was no breaking in, no desperate gesture of making up for wrongs. She had a key now. She had a drawer in his bedroom. She had a seat at the table that was hers. Nia had grown an inch in the past year, lost 2 teeth, and developed strong opinions about everything from climate change to the right amount of cheese on pizza. She called Victoria Vicky now, a nickname that would have been unthinkable to anyone who knew the CEO, only in professional settings. On weekends, the 3 of them did ordinary things. Grocery shopping, park visits, movie nights where Victoria fell asleep before the credits rolled, just as Darius used to do. Darius walked into the kitchen to find Victoria and Nia at the counter together, both of them wearing aprons, flour dusted on their faces, trying to make cookies. The recipe says 350 degrees, Nia announced, but Vicky thought it said 450. The print was very small. Victoria defended herself. In my defense, the first batch didn't actually catch fire. They caught smoke. Nia corrected, which is almost fire. Darius leaned against the doorframe, watching them argue about oven temperatures. A year ago, he would never have believed this scene was possible. A year ago, he was drowning and didn't even know it, convinced that the weight pressing him down was simply the shape of his life. "Can I help?" he asked. Nia thought about this seriously. "You can eat the mistakes. We have a lot of mistakes." The three of them worked together in the small kitchen, bumping elbows and trading jokes, and making cookies that ranged from acceptable to genuinely questionable. It was chaotic and imperfect and completely, utterly ordinary. Later, after Nia was in bed and the kitchen was clean, Darius and Victoria sat on the balcony where so many important conversations had happened. The parking lot below was quiet. The city hummed softly in the distance. She asked me today if we were going to get married. Victoria said. Darius raised an eyebrow. What did you tell her? I told her that was a conversation for another time. She then informed me that if we did get married, she wanted to be the flower girl and also the ring bearer because she didn't see why those had to be separate jobs. That sounds like Nia. Victoria was quiet for a moment. What would you tell her if she asked you? Darius looked at the woman beside him, this person who had entered his life through guilt and transformation and stayed because of something that had grown far beyond either of those things. He thought about all the reasons this shouldn't work, all the obstacles and complications and judgments they faced. He thought about the fear that still lived in his chest, the scar tissue from losing Janelle, the protective instincts that told him carrying this much was dangerous. And then he thought about how it felt to come home and find Victoria already there, how Nia's face lit up when she talked about Vicky's visits, how he laughed more now than he had in years, how the weight he had carried for so long had finally begun to lift. "I'd tell her," he said slowly, "that when you find someone who sees you, really sees you, the whole you with all your complications and history and struggles, you hold on to that person because being truly seen is the rarest gift anyone can give." Victoria reached for his hand. Even if it's complicated, especially then, they sat together in the darkness. Two people from different worlds who had found their way to each other through circumstances neither could have predicted. The future was uncertain, as it always was. But for now there was this, a home that had changed from a place of exhaustion into something warm and alive, a child who was flourishing, a love built on the foundation of truth, however painful its origins. In the morning they would make breakfast together. Nia would spill orange juice. Victoria would burn the toast. Darius would pretend to be frustrated while secretly enjoying every moment. But for now, in the quiet of the evening, he simply held her hand and felt grateful, not for the circumstances that had brought them together, but for everything that had grown since, for the proof that even the deepest wounds could become the site of new growth, for the reminder that sometimes when you have been invisible for so long, being finally seen was just the beginning. Nia's voice drifted from her bedroom, small and sleepy. "Daddy, Vicky, can someone bring me water?" They both stood at the same time and caught each other's eyes and smiled. "I'll get it," Victoria said. "No, let me. We'll both go." They walked to Nia's room together. Two sets of footsteps in an apartment that had once felt too empty. The purple walls Darius had painted with such desperate hope now held drawings Nia had made, some of them featuring three figures holding hands. A family, however unconventional. Victoria got the water, while Darius smoothed Nia's hair back from her forehead. "Sleep tight, baby." "I will." Nia's eyes were already closing. "I love you, Daddy. I love you. Vicky, we love you, too," they said together, and the words had the weight of truth. They left the door slightly open, the hallway light spilling in, and walked back to the kitchen without speaking. There were still dishes from the cookie disaster. Victoria started washing them just as she had on that first improbable night. But this time Darius stood beside her and dried. The water ran. The dishes clinked. Outside the world continued with all its complications and injustices and possibilities. But in this small kitchen, in this imperfect apartment, something had been built that mattered. Justice wasn't just about correcting wrongs or punishing the guilty. It was about being valued for who you truly were. It was about having someone in your corner who would fight for you, and with you even when the battle seemed endless. Darius had spent 2 years being invisible, exploited, dismissed. He had questioned his own worth every single day. He had believed the lie that he simply wasn't enough. Now, drying dishes beside the woman he loved while his daughter slept peacefully down the hall, he finally understood what enough actually meant. It meant this, exactly this. Nothing more required. Home.